Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Film Club podcast, where every month we deep dive into a different aspect of cinema, directors, actors, genres, or franchises. It doesn't matter, because it's always fun at the Film Club. I'm Dean.
I'm Boo.
And this month we're talking about movies. And this week we're talking about
Chaplin.
That's right, we're talking about Chaplin, starring Robert Downey Jr., directed by Richard Attenborough, comes out in 1992. And it is a good film.
Not something you hear from Dean all the time.
I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is just so good in the goddamn movie.
He is. He's very talented.
Yes, very, very talented. He's more than Iron Man. Not his best performance. That's in Tropic Thunder. But this top three Robert Downey Jr. performances. But it's okay. I like the movie, but this was your pick. You built the month?
Yeah, this is my month. Kind of weird how all the movies I picked for this month have to do with, like, silent movies, golden era of Hollywood.
All except, like, Fabelmans, and that was a last-minute addition anyway.
Yeah, that was because, we had an issue with the original movie we were trying to fit into the schedule, but... Yeah, this is a movie I have been wanting to talk about for a long time. Another near and dear movie to my heart. And I got to watch it with you for your first time, 5 years ago?
Something like that. And my problems with the movie then, I think are still the problems I have with it now.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm gonna make the blanket statement here. I think this is a good movie. All right, this is a 4 on my letterbox.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the good category because, again, the acting is great.
Yeah.
The production is wonderful. You really feel like you're in old Hollywood. My issue is that this is a very truncated and oddly structured narrative because it's truncating all of Chaplin's life into like 2.5 hours, and it's pumping along like it's a you're getting all these vignettes of his like 50 most important moments
Mm-hmm.
of his life without there being a proper narrative through line throughout everything.
Yeah, I mean, it was an originally 4-cut-hour movie.
Oh, it's a 4-hour cut?
Yeah, there was originally a 4-hour cut. They shot over like 200 hours of footage, so I feel like this should have been, maybe at least a 3-hour, 30-minute movie, just to really kind of, show the range of his life, because this movie takes place from January of 1894 to April 10th of 1972. So, I mean, we are just going, decade after decade, and we're missing a lot of, big moments because they have to focus on some of the really big moments. So you feel kind of like that, we need to focus on this more. So I guess we're going to have to get rid of, the birth of like 8 of his children.
See, that's the thing that really weirded me out of the movie, because in the movie it's like, oh, because I don't know that much about Chaplin as like a human being. Mm-hmm. I knew he grew up like dirt poor, and he, American Dream, became, most famous man in the world. But I didn't realize he had 10 fucking kids.
Yeah.
And this movie is like, he had like 3 children. And then there was like all these other ones there that we don't want to talk about. Yeah. And that's like really weird. There's the whole thing where they completely gloss over a lot of like the controversial stuff he had coming up in like the later part of his life. Mm-hmm. There's a whole thing going on with like the biographer in this movie, played by Anthony Hopkins, that's not real.
Yeah, I'll say that's totally, fake in the movie.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot of things that are just kind of like, there's a lot of things going on in the movie where they're smoothing over a lot of his weirder like proclivities to just make things easier to like follow along with.
That, and there was also a lot of scheduling conflicts because it is directed by Richard Attenborough, and at the time this is when he was filming Jurassic Park.
If you're wondering who Richard Attenborough is, he says the famous line, "Welcome to Jurassic Park." He's that guy. Yes, he's I forget the character's name, but he owns Jurassic Park.
John Hammond.
Thank you. John Hammond. He owns the island, so he's kind of a major role in that movie. But yeah, Richard Attenborough directed this, because I think he wanted it to be like a mini series originally, and then because of all the other scheduling conflicts, they were like, we'll make it into a movie. Because there's like 4 writers on this that tried to truncate 2 different biographies into this movie. It's a wild ride. It's a wild ride.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, like any movie, it's gonna have its issues. I mean, even Kevin Kline, he brought in one of his children into the world during this time, and he's like, I can't be Douglas Fairbanks, and Richard Attenborough was like, I'll give you like a month. So he's like, you know, meet your kid, and then you're back on the set. So it's like,
yeah,
you know, it's those little, you know, bumps in life, and it's like, you know, yeah, I could see how this would change up the pacing of the movie. But I mean, this movie moves very fast.
A little too fast.
Because we don't even get to see a lot of, like, you know, when they start United Artists.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. They gloss over the founding of United Artists. There's no mention of D.W. Griffith at all.
No.
There's no mention of Buster Keaton or Harold Lloyd, who were, like, Chaplin's, like, main rivals in, like, Hollywood during his, like, golden era.
We don't see, you know, when Chaplin meets Albert Einstein for the first time. There's a lot of these big moments, like when he meets Helen Keller. It's like, you know, these huge moments in his life, but we have to focus on, you know, the film, obviously.
Yeah, we're focusing on his... I don't even know what we're really focusing on. I guess we're focusing on, like, these are the moments in Chaplin's life that kind of formed him and led to his eventual exile from America.
Because really the movie, it's, you know, he's working on his autobiography, but it's more like we're drifting in and out of memories that he's having.
Like you do in an autobiography?
Like you do in an autobiography. So, you know, you have, I can't remember the biographer's name, the writer.
Sir Anthony Hopkins, because that is his name.
No, George Hayden, the character.
Played by Sir Anthony Hopkins.
Yes. But, you know, you have, you know, George Hayden with his, you know, basically his master list of, you know, these are the things that we need to hit. So we're going by, you know, from childhood all the way up till, you know, exile. So it's just, you know, oh yeah, you know, my mom was on the stage and she was performing, and that's when I really, you know, took to the stage for my first time.
Yeah, because the opening of the movie, I mean, like, the proper opening, once we actually get to his childhood.
Yeah.
Like, you get the sense that, you know, oh, he was this kid born for the stage, coming in, and he was going to be a vaudeville, you know, star. And his mom was a known actress, but she wasn't a star. And then as the movie goes on, it becomes more and more apparent that she has, like, very serious mental illness that really weighs on him, because the whole opening of the movie where we're seeing young Charlie Chaplin, like I guess 16 or whatever, when he's a kid. Oh
yeah, I mean, he must be like 4 or 5, you know, when we're seeing him perform on the stage for the first time.
Oh, well, I'm talking about, like, the whole first act when he's young. That's him that's shaping Charlie Chaplin and his view on class, because it really hammers home that, yeah, Charlie Chaplin was born dirt poor, like, absolutely broke. He was in a workhouse when he was like 9, and all these other things, and that was a huge chip on his shoulder his entire life.
He was actually put in that workhouse 2 times.
Oh, really?
In the movie they show it, you know, he tries to escape the one time, and then he, you know, gets out of there after a year. But yeah, in his actual life he was in the workhouse 2 times because, you know, his family was like, okay, mom's making a little bit money, and then I don't know if she got, you know, laid off again, and then it was like, okay, you can't take care of your kids, we got to put them back in the workhouse.
Yeah, it's see, that's the thing, because his childhood is portrayed to be very rough. You know, it's portrayed that he grew up incredibly poor in, like, the heart of London, right?
And I mean, I love that, you know, that his childhood is portrayed in his films.
Yes.
When you look at, you know, the what would be like the ghettos?
Yeah. I mean, well, look, the easiest one-to-one for what we see in his early childhood for what we see in his films is the kid, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's, like, you know, spot on, the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's this poor, like, East End London shithole, you know, to make light of it. But yeah, it is, like, the movie is making these points that these are the moments that shaped his great works.
These are the moments that inspired him.
Yeah.
Because, when you see the children running when they tell him that, hey, mom, hey, Charlie, your mom's gone crazy again. That's like in The Kid, where you have all the kids playing out in the street. And, you even have him with the big shoe when he's like digging through the mud and he finds the shoe and he's, impersonating the old drunk that's going down the street. And it's like you see all these, Easter eggs of this is who this man is going to become.
Yeah. And then, because that's like the whole first, 20 minutes of it is his childhood.
Yeah.
And once we get to him, because I think his brother Sidney bails him out of the workhouse, right? Or gets him out of the orphanage or does something, because Sidney's the one that gets him the job in vaudeville.
He does. I know that when Charlie's trying to make the escape from the workhouse, it's because I guess Sidney's aged out and they're going to put him on a battleship. He's enlisted in the Navy. So I think, by the time that Charlie has to put their mother into the psychiatric hospital.
The asylum.
The asylum, thank you. I think then, he was probably able to contact Sidney and be like, we don't have any family, I need you to come back and take care of me, basically.
There's also another thing that is kind of glossed over in the movie, because didn't Charlie Chaplin have another brother?
They had a third brother. They had a younger brother, and I think he was 6 months old when he was taken away from the family.
Oh, okay.
So I think they were reunited with each other 30 years later. So it wasn't this thing where, he came back in and they just never featured him in the movie. It's no, it was...
They met much later in life.
A whole lifetime later they met.
See, because that's another thing, because that feels like a kind of an important point in his life that's just not mentioned in the movie.
I didn't even know that till I was doing my research last night. I'm like, there was another brother? Whoa.
Yeah, and because the movie is really focusing on the fact that Charlie Chaplin had, again, a huge chip on his shoulder for growing up poor and his family being this really underprivileged, really... They would have been that family in the neighborhood where it's the mom's, she might drink a little too much and the kids are kind of on their own. He's had a huge chip on his shoulder for being that family.
But, it wasn't like that because, his mom actually was suffering from mental illness. They, were poor, they were hungry. But, this chip that, he had, this could have been, used in a very negative light. He could have become an alcoholic. He could have become a drug addict. He could have, but it's no, he used this to, launch himself into, standing up for the little guys.
And the little ladies as well.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into that.
We're going to talk about that, obviously.
Because once he kind of enters in vaudeville, when Charlie gets him out, gets him his vaudeville start, Charlie's, then we finally get Robert Downey Jr. as Charlie Chaplin, and he's playing the grandest drunk in the vaudeville stage, and he meets a very lovely lady.
Hetty Kelly?
Hetty Kelly, right?
Who was a real person. I mean, it's always weird to, look at the cast listing, and it's, everybody except for Sir Anthony Hopkins is a real, public figure.
Yeah.
So, Hetty Kelly was very much a real person, was the first love of his life. And it's so interesting that, never kissed her, never, made it official as a couple, but she, made such an impact on him that, she would be basically his heroine of all his stories, for decades to come. And
that's a thing, because in the movie, they make a point where it's okay, she is his first obsession.
Yeah.
She's he offers to marry her and she's oh, I'm too young. I'm 16. And he's
19.
Yeah. And this is turn of the century, England. It's okay, 16, 19. Yeah. Okay. That's a reasonable age gap for this time era.
They're both, entertainers. They both kind of know, I want to, pursue this dream and see, where it leads me to.
And she turns him down cold,
yeah.
Which interesting. And he's I'm gonna go to America then, and I'm gonna make my fortune, and I'll come back for you, you pretty girl.
Hetty Kelly.
Hetty Kelly, thank you. And once he goes off to America, we get the Hollywood stuff, the movie making, the magic picture stuff.
He goes to America, and we land in Butte, Montana. Because
yes, I was going to gloss over when he fell in love with movies, but it's probably a little important.
It's a little important, yeah, because, he lands in Butte, Montana, because it's not this kind of story where, he goes from impressing Carno, that's the name of the guy that leads the vaudeville troupe.
Oh, the asshole that like ruins his chances with with even having the slightest monochrome of having a good time in his life.
Yeah, Fred Carno, that would be the man who was a real person. But because Fred Carno takes him into his troupe, and he really turns into this slapstick comedian, physical comedian that he's brought over to the States, and I don't think he's even has movies in his foresight. It's, just I'm here for the stage. And then he has, like our Fabelmans moment where he sees his first movie or first Nickelodeon. And he is just in a trance. And it's like, you could see the future in his eyes.
Yeah, because it is a very interesting thing that the movie is making this point is that Charlie Chaplin pretty much exists at the dawn of cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because when, first time he sees a movie is how a lot of people would see the movie for the first time, is in a barn, you pay a nickel, and there's some guy just rolling a projector and somebody playing piano, and you're watching 5, 10, 15-minute little shorts that people are making in, far off California land. And it is fascinating because Robert Downey Jr. plays it so well where he is mesmerized by it.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's mesmerized by it like, I can make so much money doing this. It's, how does this work? Why is this so effective? How are you able to tell stories like this? Because the stage doesn't work like this.
No.
He's enthralled by it.
And I love that, we see him basically falling in love with film. And, we don't really see him like, trying to make up an idea of, I'm going to get to California any way I can. It's like, no, he receives a telegram because someone saw him portraying the drunk, and it's like, well, I want you in my movies.
Yeah.
So it's like, this drop in the bucket kind of moment where it's like, wow, someone actually, with power saw me performing and they want to take me under their wing.
Which, that felt like a movie contrivance a little bit, because I don't know how real that is, because it's like, the day he fell in love with movies was also the exact same day he was whisked away to Hollywood.
No, I mean, I don't know if it's that exact, but it was that, I think Max Sennett or one of his people had seen Charlie portraying the drunk, and they're like, he would be great for, the Keystone comedies.
Well, I assume that's correct. I was just making a point where it's like, yes, the moment that he saw film for the first time, Max Sennett is like, you know what? I have the spidey sense. Let me get this Charlie Chaplin kid in.
Yeah,
that's probably a little bullshit.
That's probably movie magic, but
But then we finally get probably the best supporting actor in the movie in Dan Aykroyd playing Max Sennett.
Dan Aykroyd does a really good job as Max Sennett.
It is so funny because he has all the little Dan Aykroyd mannerisms, and he is played exactly like you would imagine a 1940s gangster would if he didn't know he was funny. Because Max Sennett is walking around and he's spitting his tobacco and he's like, now you look here, Charlie, there's a thing. You gotta be funny, kid. And it's great. I love it. But we do get to see kind of Charlie Chaplin understanding movies for the first time. Because he walks onto the Max Sennett lot in beautiful California. Which is really
Encino.
Encino, you know, beautiful Encino. It's still California.
Yeah.
And he walks into a shot and Sennett's like, oh, don't worry, kid. We'll fix it in post. And he's like, what the fuck is that? And he shows him cutting him around in editing, right? And I love every time these movies about movies do editing and show you the magic of filmmaking, because that is the moment I think Charlie Chaplin realizes that movies could do things.
Yeah.
Because, he's watching the Nickelodeons in Butte, Montana, and he's more like, well, this is fascinating. I'm enthralled by this. And then when he sees how they work, he's like, I can use this. I can conquer this.
I can do this. It's not as difficult as I'm, probably thinking that it is, but it's like, no, you're really, cutting and pasting these scenes together. And it's like, yeah, Charlie walks into the shot and he's like, okay, give me a couple more frames of Mabel. And then, that should solve the problem. And then you see, the transfer of the two scenes and he's like, I can do that.
Yeah. And I mean, with the help of Agent Fox Mulder, anything is possible.
Oh, yeah.
because you have David Duchovny just playing the projectionist or the cameraman. There's a lot of random, like, big-name actors in the supporting cast.
Oh, yeah. It's like every time you look at the screen, you're like, oh, my God, he's in this movie? She's in this movie? But, yeah, funny thing is that, we have Max Sennett Studios and, it's surrounded by orange groves. We have driven by it before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's still around. It's survived all this time, but, yeah, it's over in, like... It's near, like, Silver Lake and Los Feliz, so we've driven by it a couple of times. And it's just, like, you wouldn't think after all these years, because Max Sennett, kind of got smoked by Chaplin.
Yeah, because, I mean, this whole section of the movie is Chaplin earning his bones and learning how to, like, make movies and all these other stuff. They gloss over, like, the bunches of shorts he made for Max Sennett.
And I guess there was also a period of time where he went and he worked in Chicago, because he was kind of like... I'm kind of getting tired of, like, the Max Sennett kind of shorts. I want to do, my own stuff. And he ended up getting, like, a really big pay raise in Chicago and then, came back. And I think that's when he created United Artists with Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford.
Yeah, because there's this whole thing in the movie because Chaplin comes over to Max Sennett Studios. Max Sennett does, like, the Keystone Cops, legendary classic comedy stuff. He was, like, the king of the comedy shorts for, like, a decade. And him and Chaplin get into this argument. Chaplin wants control. Sennett's like, go fuck yourself. And Chaplin's like, well, I will. And I'll take the Tramp with me. Because, the Tramp character.
That's his character.
And in the movie, they make a note where it's like, yes, as soon as Chaplin left, Max Sennett became a penniless drunk. And his life was over after that. And it's like, it's this funny thing where I don't know how true it is, but it's like, yes, the moment after Chaplin left them, their lives were ruined forever. Because that's like everybody in the movie. At the moment Chaplin is like, I guess we're no longer friends anymore, their lives turn into absolute ruin and squalor.
I mean,
every single one.
I know, I think it's in the 30s that Max Sennett got like an honorary Oscar because he's another one of these pioneers that, helped filmmaking become, an art form, an actual thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we do get that where it's like, boom, Charlie's out and this person, is penniless.
Shutter the doors, get the whiskey out. Life's over. Chaplin's gone. God has left the building. It's done.
But I mean, I love the scene where, because when he is with Max Sennett, he does create the Tramp.
Yes.
And we do get the scene where we see him basically tying the character together. We get Sir Anthony Hopkins telling him bullshit. It didn't, happen in this dream-esque,
He describes it as, I walked in and I saw the hat and I knew, there's a character there, and I put it on and then I felt the cane and it almost flew out of the bin and came into my hands, and there I saw it, the Tramp, a lovable loser, somebody who, doesn't want to work, wants to survive. He needs to be somebody for the people. And Anthony Hopkins is like, oh, come on, dog. And he's like, all right, I ran around and I kind of threw some shit together because I only had 15 minutes in wardrobe, and that's what I found.
And that's why, I love seeing him run around wardrobe because people are screaming for him, you're late. We need to, start rolling. And it's just, you see him slowly build the character. And it's like, oh my God, that's Charlie Chaplin. And it isn't until he trips when he's walking on his way to set.
And he gets the walk.
And it's like, oh my God, that is Charlie Chaplin come back to life walking down Max Sennett Studios.
See, that's the thing. Because Robert Downey Jr., great actor, fine actor, wasn't convinced until that moment when you see him do the walk. Because up until then, he's just playing, he's playing slapstick British man, right?
Yeah.
Once he does the Tramp walk and you see the first Max Sennett Tramp short with like the wedding and all that stuff.
Where he really lets him just go.
Yes. That's when I'm like, oh no, Robert Downey Jr. has really tapped into the essence of the Chaplin performance. The physicality, the pantomime, the character of Chaplin.
I think Robert Downey Jr. spent 18 months studying Chaplin, studying his movies, his mannerisms. I think he got a coach from like the vaudeville days to teach him how to basically walk and fall and do all these,
Probably not the vaudeville days, because they would have been either 100 or dead.
No, but I mean, like, someone that was, trained in the vaudevillian,
His styling.
I think he had worked with, like, Benny Hill. So it's like kind of to put him in that, range where, okay, this is how you drop, this is how you use your body. And then I had read somewhere that I guess over in London, one of the museums has like a full Tramp costume.
Yeah. There's a few of them still hanging around.
And, I guess Robert Downey Jr. was able to talk to them and say, hey, I'm going to be in this biopic about him. Can I at least try on his clothes?
Or I think it was his coat, right?
No, he was able to try on, I think, the full costume.
The full suit?
The full suit.
That thing's got to be, like, older than his father.
And he fit in it.
That's interesting, because Chaplin was not a large human being.
No, he was on the shorter scale, but yeah, he fit in it, and he said that he had put his hand in one of the pockets, and he had found, like, half of, like, a cigar. Like, something that he'd put out, and it was just like, if you want your blessing from Chaplin, there you go, You fit in the suit, so, I give it to Robert Downey Jr., he really put in the work to become this person.
Yeah, like, say what it's probably not a 100% accurate Chaplin, right? Like, Chaplin to Chaplin, it's a movie performance, but it's a moving performance. It's such a good character he's playing here.
And I mean, the fact that you have a real Chaplin that's on the cast of Chaplin.
Yes. I believe Chaplin's oldest daughter is playing the Robert Downey Jr.'s mother in the movie. Yeah. Geraldine Chaplin?
Geraldine Chaplin. She portrays her grandmother, Hannah.
Mm.
And, you have a Chaplin on the cast, and she was... I had to look to see, where she fell in line. Yeah, she's, I think, their first daughter, and Una. And it's just like, it being a trip to meet someone from the Chaplin family, but then to, that's your father, and to see this man that looks like your father on your father's studio, I'm like, that's just...
Yeah, because I'd imagine it's probably a little surreal, because, I mean, I looked up some stuff about, like, Chaplin and his family, because, again, I'm like, he had, like, 10 fucking kids, and 8 of them came after he was, like, in his, like, when he was 55, I think, and I was curious about it. I guess his later kids didn't really have a very close relationship with him, probably because he was just so old, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to play, catch with your dad when he's in a walker kind of thing.
It was also a thing where, by that time, because I guess he was still, wanting to do movies, because we have, like, Monsieur Rideau,
Limelight,
King of Kings.
Oh yeah, the King of New York.
King of New York. There you go.
And then the one he did with Brando and oh god, he did one with Brando that was like his last directorial effort.
So he was still acting, but I guess he was having strokes.
Yeah,
and it was affecting his everyday life, so he had to retire. So I can see why that might have been a strain on his relationship with his kids, because you're not feeling well, you're getting older. It's kind of hard to keep up with children. And
it's also a thing you see in the movie, and I'd imagine this is probably a accurate portrayal. He comes off as kind of a cold person. He's a very perfectionist, workaholic kind of guy. Yeah. That's not a very easy person to get along with, which we see kind of coming up now, because he leaves Max Sennett. He's gonna go and he's gonna start making, like, moving pictures.
Yeah, because he part of him leaving Max Sennett is that Sidney, his older brother, and his wife arrive in America, because now he's making money. They could come here and live with him, and it's well, my brother's gonna be my manager. This way, I can focus on writing, directing,
the creative aspects,
composing, and then I have my brother, that makes my deals for me.
And we meet his first wife.
Yeah, I mean...
do you want to broach this topic now and just make the blanket statement that it's weird as fuck, but it happened?
Yeah, it's very weird.
So, Mr. Charlie Chaplin, this is true to life, he had a thing for teenage girls.
Younger women.
His first wife was 16. He was 32?
He was 28 or 29. Because I know they make a point of it, they're like, Charlie, you're barely 29 and you've already made 30 movies, and then,
yeah,
you see the whole kind of, back and forth with him and Douglas Fairbanks, oh yeah, you're with this chick. She's nice, I guess. Can't put a sentence together, but she's all right.
Yeah, and it's a thing because his first wife is 16. His second wife is 21. His third wife's again 16. Yeah, it's a thing where he had a thing for much younger women, and even his wife Una, I think she was 18 and he was 50 something.
Yeah, that was
a little big of an age gap.
Yeah, and I mean,
and it's a weird thing because he fooled around a lot, because there's a point made later on that he had an affair, I guess before Una and something.
Oh yeah, with Joan Barry.
Yeah, and he had a very complicated relationship with women in general. There's reports of him being maybe not he wasn't a hitter of it like that kind of abusive, but he was generally kind of a dick to people. Because I think his second wife, he described her as just an upfront bitch. Yeah, and he was not a fan of her, and she had his first kids.
Yeah, his first set of twins is with Lita Gray, and she was in The Gold Rush. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's such a funny line when he says it. To Anthony Hopkins, he's like, well, you barely talk about your first wife. There's 5 lines, and he's like, well, she was an upfront bitch, and I was just like, so it's kind of I think with him, he's got that dry British sense of humor. So it's kind of that's where, some of this feels some people might take it oh, wow, he's being super harsh, but I think he's just being very dry.
I don't know, because it feels I mean, again, we're going to get into this whole thing. He was a little predatory on some of these women. Yeah,
I mean, his first wife is Mildred Harris, who's played by Mila Jovovich in this movie. Mila was actually 16 when she filmed this movie. And, we have that scene where she disrobes for him. Mm-hmm. And this was before...
it was before laws of nudity for younger actors was finalized.
So after this, it bumped up to 18 where you could do this. So you really feel yeah, she is 16 and she is getting into this relationship. And it's altered in the movie because, in the movie they make it that there is no baby.
Yeah, she lied about the pregnancy, which is not true.
No, there was a baby. There was health complications. I think he only lived to be 3 days. Yeah. And then he passed. And I think their marriage only lasted a year or 2. I mean, I don't know if it lasted that long because of, documentation and the time that it was, but...
There's also a thing where, this happens throughout Chaplin's life. I think any time he, knocks somebody up, he marries them. Because there's a thing where I think his third wife, he was afraid he knocked her up and they got married in Mexico. And with this,
it's Lita Gray that because Hoover's after him, and he goes, oh well, he married her in Mexico, so this is the second wife. It gets confusing because I think Paulette Goddard is the third wife.
Yeah, because
but a lot of these marriages only lasted a couple of years.
Yeah, Una's the only one that lasted very long at all
through his death.
And with that, it's one of those things that's a really complicated thing about this guy, because he was a great artist, but he was a Woody Allen level creep.
I don't think I'd put him, in that territory. No, I mean, I don't agree with, the underage, marrying of these girls, but I wouldn't put it with Woody Allen. And I mean, in the movie, it feels like he's trying to find Hetty. Yes. And it's like he's stuck in that moment. He is that 19-year-old that is out in front of that cart proposing to this girl, and it's like he's not realizing that he's aging. And they make a point of it, saying that, that time is his worst enemy. That's one of his quotes. And it's like, it feels like, he's looking for her, and it's like, oh, there's this, 16, 18-year-old girl, this is her. And then it's not till we finally get to Una, who, Una plays, or the actress that plays Una and Hetty are the same actress. And, he's like, I've been waiting for you.
It's a thing where it plays into the fact that Chaplin was an obsessive human being.
Yeah.
And
and everything had to be perfect.
Yes. And, with his first wife, the child died, and the movie doesn't even mention that.
No.
And that is the precipice, or not, that's the pinpoint moment as to why he makes his first feature, The Kid.
The Kid, yeah.
And that movie, you've seen The Kid, I assume.
I can't watch The Kid. The Kid...
Really? It's so good!
No, it's a great movie, but it breaks my heart.
Oh, but it's so funny. It's got a nice, lovely ending and all this other stuff.
Yeah, but I mean,
I'm gonna keep talking like this because it's so nice.
But it just, it breaks my heart. It's a wonderful movie. It has some of the best gags in it. I mean, you have Jackie Coogan in it, who grows up to be Uncle Fester on the original Addams Family TV show, and it's just the connection that the two of them have to each other. It feels authentic. It feels like he has taken in this little boy to be his own child. And you kind of see, this could be Charlie trying to remedy that he had just lost a child, and at the same time, he's remedying the father that he never had.
Another thing that was a huge chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
It feels like Chaplin had all these obsessions that, plagued his life, and it drove him crazy, and he spent all of his money and creative energy trying to write them in his fiction.
Yeah.
And after The Kid, he has to go off to like Salt Lake City to edit it and get it released and everything.
Yeah, because they're trying to seize the picture for him. And I love that, they're just, we got to cross state line and we got to do this in secret and the police are after us.
And they have a whole Keystone Cops little bit right there.
They have the whole bit. They have Charlie in his sister-in-law's clothing, running around from the cops. He ends up in his bloomers, and it's just, it's very silent picture slapstick comedy.
And doesn't happen enough in the movie, if I say so myself. But after that section, this is where it gets really fast, because this is where it starts like speed running. Like, basically you speed run all of Charlie Chaplin's 30s and 40s in very quick succession, because like, he marries his second wife. She has his 2 kids. He makes the Gold Rush. He makes, I think he makes Gold Rush, City Lights, Modern Times, and you completely gloss over the fact he starts up United Artists. We get one scene with Mary Pickford in this film.
No, we get 2. We get the first one at the party, the one at dinner with Hoover. And that's when she's the one that kind of, breaks it to him that the marriage that he's in is a sham.
Yeah, which, wild to me. We get 2 scenes with Mary Pickford. We get like, we get a few with Douglas Fairbanks. 0 with D.W. Griffith.
But I mean, going with actual history, the 3 of them went around to sell war bonds. So it's like, we missed a ton of, their history together.
Yeah, like there's a lot of very important things in his life that are just kind of glossed over for brevity, obviously, but it's a thing where it's kind of weird that it's just never mentioned, because I think they mention, or Anthony Hopkins like, so then you started United Artists and then you really had control. And Chaplin's like, well, yes. And then proceeds to never bring it up again. I don't think they ever mention when he leaves United Artists either.
There's a lot of stuff that isn't mentioned, and I think, a lot of that's probably in that 4-hour cut. Yeah.
Again, this feels like, and it's the criticism I have with it, this feels like a super cut of a 5-hour miniseries. This feels like this should have been, a 4, 5, 6-hour miniseries that they were like, we gotta truncate it all down to a 2.5-hour picture.
Yeah.
And apparently Richard Attenborough had a 2-hour 40-minute cut, 2-hour 50-minute cut, like a substantial cut of this movie that he was like, this is my theatrical cut, this is my director's cut. And they trimmed it down even more. And he even felt that the one we got is missing too much.
Yeah.
And it's like a thing where it's like, God damn it, if Robert Downey Jr. wasn't so goddamn good in this movie, I'd be more mad at it.
I mean, he put in the work. I mean, because Charlie Chaplin was just so talented in so many different things. Robert Downey Jr. learned how to play the violin to play this movie. He learned how to play tennis left-handed.
I don't
and it was
want to
just
be
like, my God,
I don't want to be rude to Mr. Robert Downey Jr., but the one scene where you hear him actually play the violin, it's a little rough, right?
Hey, better than someone that, doesn't know what they're doing. And yeah, I'm just holding it for, this scene.
I know, but I'm listening to it, I'm like, I know a good violin sounds like, and that's a little rough.
Hey, homie, if you want to bring in a violin next time we record and, try to break down.
Down. Hashtag down.
All right, we'll be waiting for that next episode.
But God, it is the thing, because it's the prime years that are glossed over. Because we do not slow down until Great Dictator.
And
everything from
could that be also stylistic? Because I know we feel like a lot of things are missing.
Mm-hmm.
But in this the prime years of Charlie's life, when he's married to Paulette Goddard, and it's like they seem like a perfect match for each other, because she's on his shit. She's like
she's also of age.
She's also of age too, and I love that she makes a joke about that at him. But it's just, you see the rise and fall of their marriage, and just how when he is working, nothing else matters.
And he works a long time.
And it's not like, he's being malicious about it, because, when he sees her, he's, very loving and, like, oh, this is my wife, it's not like, get out of here, don't look at me, don't talk to me.
It's not Jack Torrance from The Shining, where he's like, you know what happens when you come in here? I lose my place and I can't work anymore. And he starts yelling at her like she's windy.
Yeah, he plays Smile, the song that he writes for modern times, but it's kind of like their thing. Every time she shows up, it's like, something clicks in his brain and he starts playing it for her. And she's just like, have all of your marriages been like this? And he's like, you'd have to ask them. And it's just like, it's heartbreaking that it's just, he's so dedicated to his craft that the people in his life don't matter when he's, creating.
It's also the thing where he was a perfectionist,
mm-hmm.
and his movies also had a lot of issues for the sole purpose of it was his worst enemy and his greatest strength.
Yeah.
Was Charlie Chaplin had infinite money, essentially.
Yeah.
He funded all of his own movies. Everything he made, he owned. He
wrote, directed, produced, composed.
Yes. So he had complete creative control, which sounds like a godsend, but it also meant that any idea he had, he shot. I think for City Lights, he shot, I don't know, 32 hours of usable footage, over the course of 2-3 years, and he just never stopped, and he was like, screw it. I'm paying for this.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to film every idea I have.
Yeah.
He would shoot, I think, everything without a script up until The Great Dictator. Great Dictator is the first completed script he had ever written. Everything else was, we're going to have the Tramp go to a gold mining town and have a fling with a girl. And then he just made up the gold rush on the fly for the 3-4 years it was in production. And that's a very, very dangerous way to make a movie, because as you see with his relationship with people, it means he has no time for anything else.
No.
He is full-blown I'm an artist and I have no boundaries, thus every fancy is at my control. And that is, I feel, his greatest enemy is his greatest strength of control. Mm-hmm. He's a guy who's incredibly controlling of his art, and that means he lets his personal life just spiral. Because he can't control, real people, I guess. He's such a complicated figure, and it's hard for me to pin down the one flaw of Chaplin that breaks him.
It's the struggle of any artist, where, when you're inspired, you gotta run with it, you gotta take advantage of it. But it's also hard to stop what you're doing. Because, once you're in it, it's like, no, I want to keep going. I want to push the envelope. I want to see where, this could take me next. And then it's like, you've got the real world out there where it's like, we need attention too. And he didn't know how to shut it off. It was, I gotta work. And, he does, early in life because he's trying to, sock away money so that, he can bring his brother over. He could buy a house for his mother, just so he can have, enough money in the bank to feel comfortable and he can start producing his own things. But he never got off that grind.
Yeah, that was a problem with him, was he was a workaholic.
Yeah.
And that's what this whole middle section of the movie is, right? And I know we're kind of going on these weird tangents, but that middle section of the movie is really just, he makes like 4, 5, 6 bangers.
Yeah.
Banger silent movies. And two of his next 2 marriages kind of fall apart because he is so obsessive. And then during this time, J. Edgar Hoover gets involved. Is on his ass for, it's never really stated why. In the movie it's because, Chaplin slighted J. Edgar Hoover at a dinner party, right?
Well, we have the dinner party, and this is when he's married to his first wife, Mildred Harris. But, Charlie's being Charlie because Hoover is just going on and on and on in this speech that he's making at the dinner table. And Charlie's doing his infamous, bread dance that we see
in the Gold
Rush. And it's been, used in so many movies afterwards. And they're like, you have to excuse, Charlie, he's a creative person. And when the creativity strikes, he goes with it. And that's when Hoover's like, strikes just like in The Immigrant when you kick, the immigration officer up the backside. And it's, it's an issue. Sydney makes that issue. We're guests here and you can't be doing this. But this is Charlie standing up for, the people that do get kicked around in life. And he's like, I kicked someone else, someone in a higher society to kind of prove a point that, you're not better than I am.
It is the thing where Charlie Chaplin, he was famous for being silent because he was the Tramp. Mm-hmm. In real life, he never shut the fuck up.
No, he always, voiced his opinion, stood up for himself. And I like that he makes that point with Una, where, it's so hard to grow older because you can't protect yourself. You can't defend yourself. And it's like, having grandparents that, had to be, in nursing homes. And, I've seen them, up until they passed. It's like, yeah, that's a scary thing where, these people took care of me. And now, I have to take care of these people and make sure no one takes advantage of them. No one hurts them. So it's like, I could totally see that this strong man that, has fought for his feelings and his opinions. Yeah, it's kind of scary when that gets taken away from you.
Yeah, and it's a thing where that's a major point for Chaplin is he, in the movie, again, we're not speaking about the real guy. For all we know, he probably, he could have burned American flags for all I fucking know. But in the movie...
But he wouldn't because he loved America.
Well, we'll get into that. In the movie, it's portrayed that he is a guy who was incredibly opinionated, and he thought America had its flaws, and he was a political commentator through his art. And Hoover had issue with that because Modern Times is a pretty big critique of like industrialization and capitalism and how, America is turning into a society that can't really take care of its people because these machines are going to put people out of work.
And, cue the latest writer's strike.
Exactly. And then he does, he also does movies like Monsieur Voodoo, which is later on, but that I think is the movie that got him kicked out of America. Because at the end of that movie, he's like, so I killed one woman. Did you know your government killed a blah, blah, blah million people during the war? And you're just numbers on a thing. Where he basically goes on a whole little speech about, hey, yeah, I might have killed one guy, but your country killed 100,000 and no one's in jail for that. Almost like the war wasn't worth it. And that's like in 1947, like we're 2 years out of the war. And that's some like, bro, there are war vets that are gonna have fucking issue with you calling that shit out. Give it like a little time here.
Yeah, and I mean it's the same like with The Great Dictator when that came out, and
which I might be trying to sound like I'm calling out Charlie Chaplin for being opinionated. The Great Dictator is a fucking masterpiece. I love that movie,
and I mean that's why with I'm sure Monsieur Verdeau, it's probably again he's being opinionated, but he's also being satirical.
Yeah.
Just like in The Great Dictator, where a lot of people still, they still don't understand that he's being satirical. He's mocking Hitler.
Yes.
And it's like, you have one of the best speeches ever in a film.
It is one of the most well-performed speeches that says some of the most broadest humanistic concepts that are a little conflicting. He's like, you must be an individual, but we must all unite against those who don't want us to be individuals. And but god damn it, he sells it so fucking well.
Yeah, I mean,
it's such a good
because you have to
speech.
sit there and you have to listen. You must be your own individual person, not like the Nazis were, where it's, this one-track mind. But if you have to fight and protect your individuality, you got to band together. And that's why, we get into the scene where the Nazis come to Hollywood. And we have that party where, he's separated from Paulette Goddard, but they're still kind of maintaining that they're married, or are they not married? Just so because they enjoy each other. They're still, hooking up. It's this thing where it's like...
It's also a thing where Chaplin was rife with controversy at this point, and he's like, can we just please not let anyone have another fucking tabloid scandal? I'm really tired of this bullshit.
But, we have that party where, the Nazis are there and they're trying to, kind of make their dig into Hollywood, and they're trying to sell people over. And you see people that are fully buying into this man that's just, the stupid lady. She's like, do you know, Adolf Person? He goes, yes, I do. And then you have Charlie, being Charlie, where he's like, I don't shake hands with Nazis. And I'm like, fuck yeah, thank you, Charlie.
It is a really good scene of Charlie Chaplin being like, you know what? Hitler's kind of a douche, and you are one too. And
because his brother was half Jewish.
Yes, and everyone thought Charlie Chaplin was Jewish for a long time because his brother identified as being half Jewish.
Well, no, his brother was half Jewish. They're not their stepbrothers. They're half brothers.
Yeah, but it was a thing where his brother identified as Jewish, so everyone assumed Charlie was as well.
And then that's when we get Charlie, who clarifies it in this movie, where he's like, I don't have the privilege of being Jewish.
Okay.
And that's a great line.
Fun fact. So, that line, I don't know if it's for real for Charlie Chaplin, but it is for real for one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, J.R.R. Tolkien, because when he published The Hobbit, right, he owned rights to it, and they wanted to publish it in Germany. And the Joseph Goebbels himself contacted J.R.R. Tolkien, through letter, and asked, we want to make sure that The Hobbit was not written by anyone of the Jewish persuasion, Mr. Tolkien. Can you clarify so we can confirm the publication of your book in Germany? And he responded back in basically I do not have the privilege of being a member of the Jewish race, but if I were, I would be proud of it, and I would wear my Star of David proudly, and I would still tell you to not publish my book. But since I am not Jewish, I will tell you again, do not publish my book, for I do not enjoy Nazis reading my work.
Damn right, J.R.R. Tolkien.
I am paraphrasing a very long
letter
written by a professional linguist. So, but yeah, I love that little bit because I love it when people make fun of Nazis. Hate Nazis.
And
Mel Brooks made a career of making fun of Nazis.
He did.
Still does.
But this is also the same party where we see Douglas Fairbanks for the last time.
Yeah, and we kind of glossed over that Douglas Fairbanks and Charlie Chaplin were
best friends.
They were homies.
Yeah.
In Douglas Fairbanks, we mentioned this when we did The Artist. Douglas Fairbanks was the guy. He was the Brad Pitt of the silent era.
He was.
Biggest action star, huge leading man, could kind of do no wrong.
I think his first movie was with D.W. Griffith.
Yes, and look, we can get into a long discussion about Griffith, and I know people might be thinking, why does he care about that racist guy? He's really important into this era of Hollywood.
Into this era because you have Griffith and then you have Chaplin for comedy. So you have these two, because Griffith was drama, right?
Well, here's the thing. Griffith started in 1915 with Birth of a Nation, which I will make a blanket statement. Birth of a Nation is not a good movie. It is not very entertaining. It's probably the most racist film ever made. It's important because of a lot of historical things centered around it that have been conflated. But Birth of a Nation is like directly responsible for getting like Buster Keaton into making movies, Orson Welles into making movies, Joseph von Stroheim into making movies. Like the reason it's so important is because a lot of silent era filmmakers and early sound filmmakers were like, who's the greatest director of all time? And they're like, well, have you seen D.W. Griffith? That guy's a fucking like cinema god. And I think it's weird you're making a movie about Charlie Chaplin where he had business dealings with the guy that is just not mentioned, you know?
Again, I think, just
and also,
not enough time. Not enough time and,
a lot of other things. Well,
yeah, a lot of other things with the other guy. But, I felt like, we missed out on a lot of, like, Douglas Fairbanks.
Yeah, not enough Mary Pickford.
Definitely not enough of Mary Pickford.
We don't get... I am so annoyed we don't get any Keaton. And we don't get any Harold Lloyd because they were his main rivals.
Yeah.
And we don't get... I think we have a walk-on cameo of a Laurel and Hardy in this. Yeah, no, I looked it up. There's somebody credited as Stan Laurel in this, and they don't have a scene in the finished product. So I'd imagine it's a walk-on cameo that's just never made point of. But it's like, there's all these people in his like circle that's just never mentioned or broached. There's no point where he's like, oh, I might be losing my touch, or hey, these guys are coming up. Like Keaton made like the general. Like, that's insane. Like,
well, I mean, we
what are we gonna do here?
We have it in one of the scenes when I think it's right before he plays tennis with Douglas Fairbanks, and they're gonna play tennis, but he goes to pick up Charlie on the set. It's when Charlie's, the tree.
Yes, yeah.
And they're exploding things, and you have that moment with Charlie where he turns and he's just like, I don't feel funny anymore. So we do get that sense in the movie where because he already has so many shorts and movies under his belt, that it's kind of like he's hitting a little bit of that burnout creatively. Yeah. But it's never like fully like, him in a slump trying to figure out, what do I do next?
Yeah, because there's never a moment in the movie where he has a full downswing or he has a full like, oh man, like this movie thing never is. I don't know if this will work out. Like, he never has doubt.
We have that for Modern Times because they're trying to figure out how to make the blind girl think that Charlie is a rich man.
Yes, and he's adamant that he does not want to use any dialogue. He doesn't want to use talkie.
Yeah, and I get those confused because, that's City Lights. But Modern Times, which is the movie that follows after that, he actually wrote a script for that. There was going to be dialogue in Modern Times, and he was going to finally transition over into sound. And then we see, with that whole City Lights scene where they slam the car door shut and they figure out that's how we'll make her think that, he is a wealthy man. So it's kind of this thing where it's like you see his aha moment and we don't have to resort to going to sound. We can, still keep up with the silent pictures. And we see that like with Last Week in the Artist with George Valentine. Oh, those, those talkies, they're not going to amount to anything. We've seen that with so many of these, actors, directors, where it's a little bit of that fear of,
new technology.
The new technology. And it's like, well, I've tailor-made my career to just this, this genre. I don't know how I'll fare going over into sound.
It's an interesting thing because I guess we are just in this middle section and we're kind of like swinging wildly around. But in this, middle section of the movie, Charlie Chaplin is introduced to the talking pictures, and he is just so adamantly against it. And he has his like creative reasons why, because he's like, well, I don't want the Tramp to ever say anything. I want the Tramp to be universal. And it's dawning on me, it's like, why don't you just like play a different character? Like, why don't you like branch out outside the Tramp? Was it a fear thing? Like, was he
probably could have been.
Like, was he just afraid that he could only be the Tramp and the Tramp only works like this, so he's just never going to change?
I mean, we kind of see that with Fairbanks when they're having the discussion of the Hollywood sign, where he's, he's getting older and it's like, I've been the swashbuckler, I've been, Zorro, I've been all these great action heroes. And he's like, now I'm the oldest action star and we're moving into talkies. What am I going to do next?
And it's kind of a sad thing. And I mean, the other thing is, like, I don't think the American public knew Charlie Chaplin was English.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been a awkward thing to hear the Tramp speak, and for him to have that kind of posh British accent that Charlie Chaplin kind of affected in his normal day-to-day life. And I think that would have been really odd for him to start talking like that as he's playing the Tramp.
Yeah, but I also think, that's been like in The Artist, where it's just, that fear, and it's like, no, people might have loved it. Like, this whole time,
We're saying that as a 2022 audience with hundreds of thousands of movies, millions and billions of movies of actors with fun and interesting and very complex accents. He's talking about the first 5 years of talkies.
Yeah, I know.
And there's a public image of Chaplin of being this kind of all-American or maybe this worldly character. I think because what is it, in modern times when he starts speaking and the Tramp finally says the first words and it's gibberish, and I think that's a conscious point of him being like, he has no country. He doesn't exist for any one place. He is of all places.
Yeah, and that's why I love his character of the Tramp, and I love that, he fought for him, that he could be anybody. And I mean, that's why, when you look, into like Chaplin's histories, in so many countries, they have statues of the Tramp because he made such an impact. And it's like, yeah, he was a man of the world. He could be any race, any character. It was wonderful that he fought to keep it, that anyone could, be a part of his movies.
And it is a very interesting creative decision, and it might have been rooted in fear, but in the movie, it's just so interesting how it's explained by Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Chaplin, that it comes off very maybe I'm set in my ways, I know what I'm doing, so I'm just gonna keep on keeping on kind of thing. Like, that's a little bit of the vibe I get. But I mean, when he finally does transition into talkies, I guess, would you call like the Great Dictator section the beginning of like the downfall, like the climax third act? Because that's when J. Edgar Hoover really like closes in.
Yeah, I mean, is it after the Great Dictator when they have the whole the baby scandal?
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, maybe without the scandal, there might have been a potential to keep going. I mean, I don't know how he could have topped The Great Dictator, because that is an amazing movie.
Yeah. And his follow-up, Monsieur Verdieu, which is like, again, that's the movie I think that actually got him like in deep water, because I think around this time, this is like 1950-ish, is when Monsieur Verdieu comes out. And you're getting like the House Un-American Activities Board. You're getting like the Red Scare. And Chaplin was...
Monsieur Verdieu was 47.
47. Okay, so we were going into it.
Yeah, because, Limelight is 52. That's another really good movie.
Limelight's the last movie he does in America, right? Because that's with Keaton.
52. He does A King in New York. That's in 57.
King in New York, I know that's in Europe. So I'm... Because his last 2 or 3 were in Europe.
And he does, A Countess from Hong Kong. That's in 67.
Jesus, that's so long in between movies.
Yeah, but I mean, so it's like, he was trying to work up until the very end, but health stopped him. But, yeah, I think the scandal with Joan Barry, I think we should finally talk about that, because... This is
like the downfall last section of the movie.
Yeah, because this is right before he meets Una, and, Joan Barry, he sees her at a party, and he's like, she'd be perfect for my next movie. And also, the girl's stacked, so that's why I'm kind of, interested. But he finally dipped his pen into crazy.
Yes.
And, we see, I mean, it's kind of good that they showed that, because, yeah, that is a thing where, he was interested in his romantic leads. And he finally met one that was, she actually had, mental issues, and she,
She had some mileage on her that was not very conducive to a healthy relationship.
And, I don't know Joan Barry's, like, actual life. I think she was institutionalized, and then after that, no one's really sure where she ended up.
Yeah.
But it was a thing where, you know, when he's regaling, you know, their story together, he's like, you know, she was getting arrested. She was arrested for DUI 2 times. She was driving to my house drunk. She was showing up. And then finally, she claims that she's pregnant with this child after they hadn't slept together for who knows how long. And that's when she ends up in Hoover's office with Hoover's assistant or whoever this guy's supposed to be in the movie. And that's when they really try to settle for this court case where he is the father. He has abandoned Joan Barry and this child, and he must pay, even though there is, you know, a DNA test and he is not the father.
I mean, there's also controversy even around that because they're like...
It was the Man's Act or something that they...
That was what actually like got him like in a lot of trouble because I guess he transported her across state lines to do illicit sexual activities. It's a law put in place to like stop pimps from transporting girls across state lines, but he actually violated it. But the other thing is there's speculation that, well, J. Edgar Hoover doctored the whole thing and that Joan Barry was never like pregnant, but he knew that, so he's just going to railroad him anyway. There's also speculation that Chaplin kind of paid to get a negative blood test and that it was actually his kid, and there's a lot of weird things about that again is not put in the movie for brevity, but it is very interesting because Chaplin's complicated relationship with women, because he was a guy that liked life a lot, and he dipped his pen into a lot of inkwells, we'll put it like that.
Yeah, and, you know, we're having this where, you know, he's, you know, dealing with Joan Barry basically, you know, stalking him at his home. Mm-hmm. And then this is around the time that he meets Una, he falls in love, and this is where we get to, like, the actual love story of the movie where he's like, I'm finally happy. I finally met somebody that, you know...
gets me. Understands me.
Yeah, you know...
looks like the girl I actually love who's been dead for 40 years.
Yeah, and, you know, then it's like, ooh, now there's going to be this court case because, you know, I'm sure at the time it was probably, yeah, you know, if you do pay her $100,000, she'll dip. And, you know, Charlie being Charlie is like, no, I want a court case. I want to prove that, you know, I'm right. And, you know, Una stays with him. Because this could be, you know, a moment of, you know, make it or break it, where it's just, this is a little bit too much for me. I don't know if I want to be part of this. But she stays by his side, and even when he's stuck paying for this child, the rest of this, you know, up till the child turns 21, he's got to pay child support. And she sticks with him.
Yeah, it's the thing where Una gets introduced. Una doesn't have a lot to do for like the time she has on screen.
Yeah. She
comes on, she's another one of these people of great affection for Charlie. Mm-hmm. She loves him kind of like really, really like loves him, adores him, right? And Charlie absolutely loves her and adores her, but we don't get a lot of Una as a character. But
she's with his children.
Yeah, she's
supporting him.
Loyal wife. That is her character she's playing. And this moment with the scandal, it's like, oh no, she really loves him because she's stuck with him through this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. That's I get that. But again, it glosses over the fact that I guess that trial went on for like a long time, and like they get married after the trial, and like once he like proves that, you know, he's innocent or whatever, or in his eyes he's innocent, in the court of law he's guilty. And there's a thing where like now Una's pregnant with like their first kid, and I think they gloss over like the last 2 movies he actually made in his final days in America, right? And this is when J. Edgar Hoover kind of comes to roost. You know, you plan Hoover in the first act, you're gonna have to fire him off in the third.
Yeah.
You know, Chekhov's Hoover, and I just got that J. Edgar Hoover. Hoover kind of sucks, you know.
He does.
And Charlie leaves America to go on like this publicity tour, and when he comes back, his visa is denied. And that's when he kind of gets exiled because, again, he's a very vocal critic of America. He also made a couple of very not smart personal moves. Like he never applied for American citizenship. He never like really attempted to make concrete roots in the United States in a way that would like, you can't like kick me out, I live here.
Yeah, I'm from here.
Yes, he never did that. And also, this was the thing that really got him. He was very friendly with like known communist sympathizers and like socialist people in Hollywood during like the Red Scare, and that was like a no-go. Like he was going to get blacklisted anyway.
But I think that, you know, him as a person, he was just friendly with everybody.
He was also a very like worldly, I just want to talk to these interesting people kind of thing.
You know, I think it's a thing where that may have bit him in the ass, but it's just he was a people person. And
you don't think it was like a malicious thing?
No,
You don't think he was a dirty red?
No, I don't.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm pretty sure too. I think he was just like a rather progressive left-leaning guy that got caught at one too many parties with some not so friendly people. That's probably the vibe I get out of him.
Yeah, you know, just you talk to a lot of people, you know, word gets round, and then, you know, rumors start to happen. And I think they
can't be the all-American Douglas Fairbanks.
They can't. I still wish we got more of that relationship in the movie.
Same. Fucking same. I also wish we got more Hoover, honestly, because I wanted to understand why he had such a hate-on for him. Because J. Edgar Hoover had a hate-on for everyone.
He did, and that's kind of weird. It's like, dude, what's your issue? Are you just that bored that you're going after celebrities?
See, I get he goes after celebrity, but he fucking hated Chaplin.
I mean, he had a 1,900-page file on all the alleged things that Charlie Chaplin did in his life.
In the movie, again, like I don't know if it was like a far more complicated thing where it's just like, oh no, Hoover didn't like Chaplin, but Chaplin like antagonized Hoover in some way, or like, oh, you know, like Chaplin didn't really do anything, but for some reason, like, you know, he stole Hoover's girl or some bullshit. But in the movie,
he stole his vacuum,
you know, because Hoover sucks.
He does.
It's got to be a thing because in the movie, the only explanation we get as to why Hoover hated Chaplin so much, and I think you mentioned it, is because Chaplin kind of talked back to him once at a party, like 40, 50 years prior, and Hoover just held a grudge forever. He's like, you made me look dumb.
You made me look foolish while I'm giving this incredibly long speech at a dinner, and then, you know, because you took a little bit of a jab at the immigration system, you know, I'm going to hold you to that forever and ever. And it's like, why? But also, you know, Hoover makes a point during that dinner, you know, because he's talking about movies and the messages that they put out. And Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford are like, what do you mean? What message? Because, you know, they're in it for, we're entertainers, we're entertaining our audience. And we have Chaplin, who's like, you know, this new star where it's just kind of like, I understand that I can make people laugh, I can make people cry, I can move people, and it's just, you know,
that is interesting because Hoover is making that speech of movies are the great, you know, 20th century art form, it can communicate things and blah blah blah.
It's
like
the great new form of communication.
He's talking about the themes and messages in movies, and he recognizes that Chaplin speaks the same language. Mm-hmm. He's like, you know what I'm talking about because I see you doing it in your movies. I want you to stop. And Chaplin's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
And I never will.
And Hoover is like, no, you're dangerous because this speech I'm giving, and you already know what I'm saying because you already know the facts about it. It's a very interesting dichotomy there. But in the movie, it doesn't explain enough as to why he fucking hated him so much. Honestly, I'm almost like, just make it up. Make up something where it's just like Chaplin spat in Hoover's eye once at a party, but or like did something.
And I think that's, you know, the point of it is just, you know, this man had a vendetta for really no reason. And, you know, he was just out there to make anyone's life miserable. And he finally did when he kicked, you know, Charlie out of the country. And then Una, she renounced her own citizenship so that she could, you know, be with Charlie in Switzerland, where, you know, he
fathered like 7 more kids and kind of lived it out.
But, you know, completes the rest of his life in Switzerland. And even Paulette Goddard, she got remarried again, and her husband, they moved to Switzerland, and they weren't, you know, too far of neighbors with Charlie and his wife. So it's just kind of like, she understood and was like, you know what? This is a really crappy thing that they did to him, and I still have his back, so you know what? I'm going to leave too.
I get the sneaking suspicion that Una probably had an understanding with Paulette Goddard, and there was probably a very romantic understanding of that relationship. I get a feeling like they probably never stopped knocking boots.
No, I think it's just a thing where it's difficult, that kind of like unspoken bond that you have in a relationship. And it's, you see it with some people when they break up, they're still friends with their former partner. It's just that deep connection, that deep bond. It doesn't have to be physical.
Oh, I'm not talking about like normal human interaction. I'm talking about Charlie Chaplin himself. Because again, that man stuck his pen in a lot of inkwells, and I think he probably enjoyed some ink more than others.
No, I don't think I've seen that anywhere that they continued something in the later years. But it's just more of a.
I don't know. My tinfoil hat says different.
Yeah, you need to change that tinfoil hat. It's kind of falling apart there.
But, we get Chaplin, and he lives out the rest of his life in Switzerland, and he ends up finally accepting his Academy Award in 1972 when he's like 80 something. He looks ancient in like actual pictures. I mean, the makeup is like makes him look very old, but you can only make Robert Downey Jr. look so old before it gets a little weird.
And they wanted someone else to play the older version of Charlie Chaplin.
I think it was Nick Nolte.
It was.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, no, you can't just, change the actors on us like that. I mean, for like the child version and the teenage version of Charlie Chaplin, that's understandable, But once we already hit, young adult to all the way up to the end of his life, it's like, no, it has to be that same actor. We can't just,
If you especially because they would change him in the last fucking 15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, now I have to re-emotionally connect with a whole new like actor. It's the same character, but it's a whole different air about it. It wouldn't work at all. But Chaplin
lived to be 88 years old. So he gets his honorary Oscar in 1972. He passed away in 1977.
Oh, okay. So he would have been like 82, 83? 83, right? 72 to 77. 72, 77, 5 years. Yeah, he'd be 83. I can do basic math. So, yeah, we see him. He's 83, accepts his Oscar. They do the montage.
I love that scene leading up to it because you could tell that not that you could tell, but he's vocalizing that he's nervous. He feels like people are going to throw tomatoes and fruit at him because he thinks that he is this social pariah and no one cares about him.
He thinks he's washed up.
Yeah, he thinks that, all this work that I've done to, make my films and put my films out there and speak to people has been, for nothing. And you have Una that's very supportive and saying, that's not true. The people love you. And I love the scene when they're wheeling him out just to get him into position to finally be wheeled out to the stage. And you see everybody in the building in their different costumes because this is the Oscars, so there's different skits. Everyone is running just so they could see the montage that they're going to play.
Because it's
Charlie Chaplin.
It's Charles fucking Chaplin.
Or Charles Spencer Chaplin, dependent.
Yeah. His middle name was fucking. Thank you very much, Charles fucking Chaplin. And
but then we get, the montage of his career, and that's when the movie gets me every time.
That's what it is the best. It is the most emotional beat of the movie that actually hits.
Well, that and when he finds out that Hetty Kelly has passed away.
Yes, the ending montage though, it hits so much harder.
Yeah. Because, Robert Downey Jr. does such a good job when he finds out that she's passed away. Because you could see he is trying to control his body, but you could see it in his eyes that he is devastated. Like someone just ripped the heart out of his chest.
Yeah, and they ask him, "What are you going to do, Charlie?" And he's like, "Put on a happy face."
No, he just says, "Smile." And, we get, smile later in the movie. But the montage, because he has done so many films, and it's like, what do you pick, to show his greatest work?
And I also love that it's real Chaplin reels.
Yeah.
It's not recreations with Downey Jr.
I mean, I love that they tried to be as spot on as they could with the recreations of Robert Downey Jr. As the Tramp.
Yes.
But we finally get full coverage of the Tramp and his greatest shorts, his greatest movies.
And it's a thing where, you know, he's watching the montage, he's hearing the crowd laugh, and he realizes, you know, it did work. He's like, I actually did do something. Like, all the work, all the pain, all the suffering, all the hardships I went through, it's kind of worth it. Like, I touched people. I communicated.
That, and, you know, we're in the 70s now. These movies were, you know, made in the 20s. People are still laughing at the beats that you want them to laugh at. It goes dead silent with the kid when they're taking the little boy away from him, and, you know, he's just, you know, pleading and crying, you know, to be reunited with his father. And you see the tears roll down Robert Downey Jr.'s face. And then we end with him sitting alone and walking off into the sunset, which mirrors with the opening of this movie of him in the doorway going in and, you know, taking the costume off. So it's
undoffing the tramp, and it ends with him in full tramp and walking off into the sunset.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful ending shot, and it goes to the whole thing, you know, Chaplin is top 5 most recognizable figures of the 20th century, probably in the top 10 most important filmmakers of the 20th century.
I think I read somewhere that the BFI had him like in the top 5 directors of all time.
I could see that. I mean, you're putting him up there with like Hitchcock, Tarkovsky, Kurosawa, Kubrick.
Because
shit,
he had such a hand in, you know, creating what filmmaking is.
And we made mention of it earlier. All the control he had. He made the movies he wanted to make. That's why they feel like pure auteurist visions, because all of him is in them. Like the kid is very much his childhood, his pain of losing his own child. Modern Times is his concerns with industrialization. The Great Dictator is his parody of Adolf Hitler and him kind of standing up for the little guy, you know, because he's like, my brother's Jewish. He's making fun of Jews. I'm going to stand up for like my people here. And even with like Limelight is an incredibly personal film for him. It's a drama. But it's him being like, I'm an aged comedian and I don't think I got the fastball anymore. He's like, I'm afraid I'm forgotten. And I bring this up because I want people to watch Limelight. It ends in, I believe Limelight ends with Buster Keaton and Charles Chaplin. It's the only time they were ever on screen together. And it's just them doing shtick. And it's like, these are the two greats. They are, honestly. Like, I bring this up, you know, it's like, oh, I really wish Buster Keaton was in this movie because I'm a Buster Keaton guy. Yeah. You're a Chaplin girl.
I am.
And it's a thing where Chaplin, great artist, great director, but he knew how to do things like sentimentality. He's very schmaltzy, honestly. He's a man after Spielberg's own heart.
And I mean, he also has the eyes too, where his eyes could, you know, evoke an emotion out of you.
Yes, and then you have Keaton, and his whole thing was the stone face, but he was also a great director, great comedian, and his talent was the fact that nothing was too extreme. He would do anything for a gag. He's like, we might derail this train and I might die, or I can make one of the funniest gags you will see on screen. And that's like that dichotomy, that power of those two, and they're on screen in Limelight, and it's these two guys who in real life are faded. They are decades away from their like heyday, and it's this perfect culmination of like Chaplin's like, this is me. This is my life. And I think that is why Chaplin is considered such a great director and a great filmmaker, is how personal he was in his movies. And in Chaplin, this movie, it should have been like 4 hours long.
It should have been,
it feels like I'm missing so much because we don't see anything from Limelight. We don't see the real founding of United Artists. We don't see his interactions with like fucking hundreds of people that really built and formed his life. We don't see his other brother at all. We don't see 8 of his kids, really.
We don't see Sydney again.
Right? Sydney cuts out of this movie after what, like the hour and a half mark? Hour 45 mark?
Somewhere in there, but, something that I've been waiting to talk about, because it's something that we did recently, is we don't see when he's exiled them packing up his studio.
Right?
We don't see the studio, the house being, packed up, because obviously he can't re-enter the country. So it's like, so who did that for him? Was it Sydney? Was it, how do you go about, packing up a whole person's life?
That would have been granted, it would have been like a pure homage to Citizen Kane, where the end of Citizen Kane, where they're packing up all this stuff. I could imagine the montage of them just packing up the Tramp outfits, them packing up the film reels, the posters, all this other stuff. That would have been a beautiful like montage of things where it's just like visually you walk away, like Chaplin's entire life, his entire being, everything he's built, his American dream has been crushed asunder, and now he is going to box it all away, and that is going to be for another. That is now his other life. Once he goes to Switzerland, basically when he goes to Europe, he's like that's it. He's like I'm a new person. He never brings the Tramp back.
No.
He only does like really dramas, honestly, after that. And it's a thing where when he got exiled, that was the death of the Chaplin that we knew.
Yeah.
Right? So the movie does get that point across because we feel like it's a different man, mostly because every time he's in Sweden or Switzerland after that, he's in old man makeup. Yeah. But I get that sense. Like there's separation between America and Switzerland, but that would have been great. That great scene of them packing up all of his stuff. But that was Chaplin. 1992, Richard Attenborough.
Well, I wasn't done making my point.
God damn. You have a lot of points today.
I do. This is a movie that I love, but I talk about, them not packing up his studio because we just recently went to his studio, his former studio, and
you could have just said we went to the studio.
Well, yeah, but I'm trying to tie that in with, that was kind of something important that we could have seen in the movie because that was a big chapter of his life. I mean, that's one of my favorite scenes of the movie is when he's driving through the orange groves and it's just his studio surrounded by nothing.
Yeah.
And, we went there for your first time this week, and I think you were just kind of a little bit, like, in shock of it's still here.
Well, because it looks like it's from the 19 teens. Like, the buildings have not changed at all. It looks ancient, and it's a thing where it's like, it's still an active studio. It's the Jim Henson studio.
It's the Jim Henson studio. That's why, it would have been interesting to see it in the movie transfer hands, because I think it was transferred one time after he was exiled, and then after that, Jim Henson bought the studio. So,
I don't know if we needed to see Jim Henson buying it. It would have been...
We don't need to see it, but just to see that, it's only been, I think, in 2 other people's hands, apart from his. So, just to see that now, still owned by the Jim Henson studio, but it's identical to the movie. It hasn't really changed. And you see in those scenes of, like when they have to go take the movie across the border, when they have to go take the kid and the reels, and you see them running in and out of the doors, and you're like, that was Chaplin's office.
That was his
and then
that was his that.
That middle door that they have, that was kind of like his music room, sun room, where they have like all the posters and the awards, and I was just like, yeah, this, this living, breathing place really was this living, breathing place that he lifted off the ground. And yeah, it's still there. It's still astonishing to see it especially when you look around the neighborhood, and it's just... Oh,
because it's not Orange Groves. It's surrounded by LA. It is surrounded by Los Angeles.
There's, a strip mall right next to it. There's houses, there's buildings.
There's a gentleman's club across the road.
There is a club of that nature across the road. But it just, now feels like, this thing that was kind of just dropped in this neighborhood. But really, it was the original thing in this neighborhood. And it's still, there, and it's still beautiful. And just to think that, so many of these great films that we just talked about in this episode were created there.
Yeah, and it's a thing that the movie, that whole little thing about the exiling of America, it's done in, Una comes up and he's like, Charlie, they've exiled you or whatever. And he's like, from from America forever? And that's it. And then he just cuts to being in Switzerland. I would have loved to have seen, the studio pack up, the house packed up, the studio, like, changing hands. I would have loved to have seen the cementing that, no, he was gone. There was no coming back for Christmas. Yeah. There was no, all right, can I go to, collect my shit? He was gone. Yep. They had to mail him his keys. Over. End of story. Let's get into this. I like the movie. It's a good movie. Wonderfully acted. Production's great. We both have the same criticism of it. Yeah. It should be longer.
It should.
It is as is. It's very fast. There's so much stuff going on. They either needed to focus it down to a very fine point, and instead of going throughout his whole life, they focus on the most important part of his life, or they just make the damn thing like 3+ hours long and just get everything enough time to breathe. Because that middle section is so dense.
Yeah.
It's so dense. But the Oscars seem to enjoy it.
Yeah, Robert Downey Jr. was nominated for Best Actor for this.
I have the Oscar noms if you wanted to hear.
I would, thank you.
Because we've done this a few times in this month. When people are nominated for Oscars, we want to figure out, did they deserve it? Was this a stacked year? So Robert Downey Jr. did not win, but the other nominees that year were Denzel Washington for Malcolm X.
Okay.
We have Stephen Ray for The Crying Game. Clint Eastwood for Unforgiven. Oh. He also won Best Picture and Best Director for Unforgiven, so Eastwood walked out with Oscars anyway.
Yeah.
But the gentleman who won Best Actor for 1992 was Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman.
Whew. Yeah, that's a stacked year.
Right? Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm looking down this list and it's like, okay, Robert Downey Jr., like, again, top 3 performances of your career, easily. Like, but then it's like fucking Clint Eastwood, like, basically hanging his hat of the Western. Like, he is a Chaplin level icon, later level Chaplin level icon, sure. But then it's like fucking Denzel Washington and Malcolm X. Really? You're gonna like line this up here, and then Al Pacino wins for Scent of a Woman.
Which I'm still going with Robert Downey Jr. deserved the Oscar
because you are biased.
I am. And Chaplin is a great movie, and he did so much to bring this character to life.
And also, I probably would have, if I had to rank these, he's in like the number 2, number 3 of the year easily for me. It's a little rough when you get like a great performance like this in a stacked fucking year like this. I mean, it's not as bad as oh god, what was it when Ian McKellen was nominated for Gods and Monsters, and that list is just a murderer's row of all-time great cinema performances. We'll get to that in a later episode.
We will.
Right.
Yeah, yes. You might have, spoiled it a little bit.
Yeah, don't worry about it. No one will notice. But the movie also, it was a very interesting critical box office success or failure. Box office, bombed. A $31 million budget, $12 million box office. Yeah. But critic reception was lukewarm at best. Because I think everyone had the same criticism we had. Great intention, not great execution, because it felt too truncated.
Yeah, we needed more time. It has all the makings of a masterpiece that's just not there. Because the performances are spot on.
Yes.
They're, knock them out of the park, performances, but it's just, we needed more. It felt a little bit rushed. There was a lot of, big moments in history that we missed. But overall, I love this movie.
I really like it. It's a really lovely movie. Because I'm not a big Chaplin guy. I like some of his movies.
What's your favorite Chaplin movie?
All time.
All time.
If I had to watch one Chaplin movie forever, okay, it's either Gold Rush or Great Dictator. Those would be my 2. I really like City Lights. Modern Times, I'm like 50-50 on. I think half of Modern Times is like really great. The other half is like too vignette-y and sketchy for me. But Gold Rush is a masterpiece. I think it's one of the funniest movies ever. And I think the Great Dictator is one of the best political satires ever, and fuck me, it might be Chaplin's best performance ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, those would be my two. Probably Gold Rush. Gold Rush, if I had to watch like one, like this is Chaplin, top of his game. This is the Tramp. This is Chaplin. I'd probably pick Gold Rush. Are you a
Mine's a three-way tie, and
Of course, it's a three-way tie.
I'll give you, my explanation. Gold Rush, because that is the most Tramp of the Tramp performances.
It is his best Tramp.
And then Great Dictator, because, it is such a hilarious movie. I love that, he just goes for it. He doesn't care. He is going to make fun of him. He's like, I don't care if he gets pissed off. I am going to, be you and be such a buffoon of who you try to, be as, the man that we shall not name, that we named earlier.
I mean, also it has one of the best scenes in cinema history, the ball. The globe.
Oh, yeah. I love the scene with the globe, and it's so dramatic with the music, and he's just laying on his desk, just kicking the globe into the air, pushing it off, with his butt. It's hilarious. And then Modern Times, because it's such a strong message that he's pushing in the movie, but he also gets the girl in the movie. In all of his movies, he's more or less on his own, but it's the two of them walking off into the sunset together, and I'm like, he's finally not alone. And that's what kind of, sticks out to me. That's like, he finally, landed the girl.
I mean, that's Paulette Goddard, right?
It is. And she puts on such a great performance in the movie.
Best Chaplin leading lady by far.
Yes.
By far. And that's, I would say, I said, Modern Times my 50-50 for me. She's in the good 50 side of that movie, easily. But, yeah, Chaplin. Is there anything more to say about the guy, about the movie?
I mean, I feel like if we did, we'd have to break out his autobiography. Which I have, not with me, but I have it at home.
Oh, really?
It is a thick book.
Oh, God.
I think it's like 500 pages.
Yeah, and yeah, Charlie Chaplin, a man of few words, and then you get him talking and he won't shut up.
Sounds like somebody I know.
But if you wanted to hear us talk a lot more, what are we doing next week?
Next week, Dean kind of spoiled it, but we're talking about another near and dear movie to me, Gods and Monsters.
Gods and Monsters. Starring Brendan Fraser for the Renaissance, obviously. And Sir Ian McKellen, who is wonderful in like every movie I've seen him in.
It's got old Hollywood, it has Brendan Fraser, it has Universal Monsters, it has Sir Ian McKellen.
It's the movie about James Whale, the director of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Invisible Man.
One of the coolest directors ever.
Will this round out our James Whale like obsession for the podcast? Because we've talked about
Invisible Man,
Bride, Frankenstein.
I feel like, we both felt like we need to talk about Frankenstein again.
Yeah, that was such an early episode.
Yeah, and we really did the Bride of Frankenstein a justice. We really, deep dived into the movie. So I think we need to go back and re-review Frankenstein.
Yeah, I would like to go back and like just re-review Frankenstein and The Invisible Man.
I'd be down.
Mostly because like I remember we did Invisible Man and like we kind of ran out of shit to talk about too quick, and I felt bad because I love The Invisible Man.
That is your movie, yes.
I love it because of the Claude Rains performance. I love it because of like that Una O'Connor camp humor going on. But like even I admitted it. Like Bride of Frankenstein's the guy's fucking masterpiece. Yeah. Like Invisible Man's probably his greatest, probably his best like technical movie. Yeah. It's his technical masterpiece. Bride of Frankenstein is probably the most personal like that is James Whale on screen. Mm-hmm. Well, we get to see James Whale actually on screen, kind of, sort of.
As himself, yeah.
Or Ian McKellen playing the man.
Yeah, but, it's not like we're talking about one of his films. We're talking about a film about him.
Yes.
So we'll be talking about that next week. And if you want to listen to us on a different platform than you currently are, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Yep, you can go to our YouTube channel, The Film Vault. That is the Film Vault on YouTube. Eventually, Dean will get around to uploading slideshow versions of this podcast so you can listen to it on YouTube. But until then, you can follow us on our social media at
The Film Club Podcast on Instagram, where we post daily stories, upcoming episodes, and random adventures we go on.
And with that,
we'll see you next week at the Film Club.
Have a good week, everybody.